So, hello everyone, I'm Carlota. I will introduce my project, but first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the research that led me to the project. So, let's start with interfaces, these plane surfaces that divide two worlds, but also merge them into one. They're a sort of porous boundaries. And what happens when both these worlds permeate into each other? A digital mutation, a symbiosis, an interference. What are the effects on our body, on our psyche, on the interface, and on digital processes? So these collages are a prototype of my early work in trying to answer all these questions, and you'll recognize them in the slides. In interface, the prefix inter stands for the between, and in a way it stands for this reciprocal surface of mutual understanding between the human and the machine. Nowadays, screens are everywhere and they're indispensable, and they become a part of ourselves. And by doing so, they make us enact a series of rituals that, in a way, elevate technology to a sort of unconscious spiritual form. Part of these rituals are interactions, and I'll go a bit quick on this, but it's as easy as swiping, pressing, scrolling. We do it instinctively, obsessively, impulsively, and often devoid of meaning. And this induces us in this sort of blank trance state as we scroll through our Facebook or Instagram feed. Grids, because everything is a grid, our system infrastructures, the external shells of our devices, matrices, arrays, pixels. But most of all, our exposure to digital media, or overexposure, makes us constantly do this process of translation from square waves into continuous waves. And because this process is repeated endlessly, it becomes a ritual. Acceleration, of course, because this routine of interaction makes us feed the speed. We're always hurrying and multitasking, asking for takeout. We make a simultaneous everything as we try to scan the more information in the more effective way. So acceleration becomes a customary practice and also a ritual. Here you see this thing that we've all done, right, in the selection square. Techno-rituals, as I call them, are different from worshipping one or several gods. They rather respond to this ungraspable and immaterial force within the cyberspace. Software and operating systems, they exist for the human. They exist so that we can operate all this digital world. But humans are becoming tasks, like in Amazon's Mechanical Turk, that replace algorithms almost. And in this way, it reduces our human ambitions to the ones of the machine. We're also becoming information for this deep machine learning, right? And the more we use the web, the more we're feeding these algorithms, the more they're learning. And in that sense, I see a possible mutation of the human into a self-OS or a human as software. Let's talk about the Web 2.0, this hope for a new web utopia, a change in collective action. Time came up with this cover in 2006, where it's quite crazy, right? Because they didn't replace the human with the machine. It is directed to you, the human, but you're inside of the machine. And this cover, to me, shows the magnitude of this new system that is developing, that is a narcissistic system that develops around the self. And I call it the Web 2.self. It's a new social construct that externally grows as a collective power, but internally it's also a mechanism of control that many of us are unaware. Take, for example, the likes, right? And it's this generative system that is fed by your ego, but also feeds your ego. And not only the ego, but also all these deep learning algorithms that sort the data, dictate the trends, and create ideal images for our profiles. So this system of likes drags us into a narcissistic loop, and we often find our actions devoid of meaning, and we're trapped into these really embarrassing situations of self-validations, like scrolling through pictures of myself or looking how many likes you got in a picture. But the Web 2.0 hasn't died yet, not that long ago, in 2014. Do you know Twitch? It's a video broadcast channel, mostly used by gamers. In 2014, this anonymous person uploaded a version of Pokemon Red, the 1996 version for Game Boy, into Twitch. And so it had a little hack so that everyone in the platform, in the chat room, could play at the same time. At the same time, everyone in the chat room, you know, it was crazy. So it became this erratic experience, this glitchy and very difficult experience. But after 16 days, with a total of 1.6 million participants, they won the game. And for me, this experience illustrates the ambition of the web. It's a sort of dawning chaos, but developing into the possibility of maybe a future hive mind of some sort. So can we consider that the mutation is heading towards a collective reality, a mesh of some sort, where individuality is entirely forgotten for the sake of a collective goal? So I'm gonna go quickly on this. These are prototypes. I came up with this notion of the technergumen that, to make it really short, is the human possessed and consumed by technology and its underlying architecture. It's a human, it's a cyborg, it's a post-human, it's a feminist, it's the singularity, it's all the concepts that talk about this evolution of the human in a techno-driven world. And they are mutated, they are a mutated reality, symbiosis, but also an augmented hybrid entity that exists in reality, but also in these unknown virtualities. And so these are part of my first experimentations, where I used latex as this sort of organic interface. And now that I look at this, they just remind me of marble sculptures in a very alienated and dramatized form, almost as if the power of technology could affect this rigidity and veracity of stone. This was part of other prototypes. I made a video with this latex interface too, and I was exploring new languages and interactions, distortions and mutations. And then we can envision the soft face. We have a soft extra face, the external boundary, the outside the flesh, the computerized skin. The soft interface, that is the between, the feedback loop. The screen that you see through the screen of another screen of another screen. And then you have the soft intraface, that is the conscious, the subconscious, this metaphysical and spiritual entity, the corrupted human or the mutated entity. And all these ideas, thoughts, theory, poetry led me to render in practice this installation that where I wanted to create a setting that would create the piece itself as a first try to visualize the human as a software. So we have 3 pedestals that are a triptych, and they very simply symbolize the devotion that we bestow on these interfaces. They have a latex screen on them that is backlit, and the screen is blank because it shows our empty, our void, and very numb interactions. And so the whole thing is set on a grid that goes back to the ritual, but also shows our interlinkness with the digital and virtual. That is sort of a simulation of reality, the one that our brains is constantly constructing for us. So this interaction with soft screens is recorded, played live, and then overlapped on the bigger screen on the floor. The user on the pedestal stands separated and alone, and he joins this collective experience on the bigger screen. And the visual data on the screen is nothing else but the raw interaction behind the latex. So there's really nothing to it. The only thing is that it replays their own image. And I use this as a trap, you know, for the narcissistic human. Because as soon as you see yourself doing something, you're hooked. And it worked. So people would keep feeding this system. And then I decided to place the screen on the floor and not on a wall like we would do with devotions and other religious things, because while our devotion isn't conscious, it's to the interfaces, to the digital, and to the self. And this Web 2.0 self drives us to dive deeper into our screens. We are not looking up, we're looking down all the time, and every time deeper. And so this is the resulting piece. It's very, I cut the video into a very short one, where the interactions are all overlapped and reside in the structure of the digital. And so this is a sort of generative processes of gestures and interactions that symbolize a piece of human software. And here you have even people, you know, they would play with their fingers and then with objects. Some of them would put their faces in the latex, and some of them would put pictures of themselves, you know, to see themselves through the screen of another screen. It was quite cool. So that's it. I'm Carlota, and I'd be glad to share more of my research with you. Unfortunately, it was a short talk, and I couldn't talk more. Thank you.
A quick question for Carlota, please.
Thanks. First of all, congratulations. What a pretty presentation. It's really, really visually exciting. And I think the piece you presented is brilliant. It's a very nice callback to the Narcissus myth, but instead of being a pond, is this virtual screen of latex. I think it's beautiful. What you were saying about this Web 2.0 self and how it's redirecting us into ourselves. I don't disagree, but what would you say about the fact that it's also allowing us to be more interconnected with each other on a collective level more than ever? So in a way, yes, it's I wouldn't say making us more narcissistic, because as a species we are super narcissistic. Everything we do is about ourselves. Even if you're into nature or ecology, it's about you, how you experience it, how you live during your ecosystem. So maybe technology is just showcasing it in a more acute way. But what do you think about this paradox of, yes, going inwards, but at the same time branching out into everyone else collectively?
Yeah, so I think we're just at this point in which we're in between, right? And we're kind of touching on different sorts of evolutions. So we had this new Web 2.0 coming in, and this is one of the reactions to it, right? This obsession with ourselves and our image and all these things. But it could at any point evolve in a different way. And to me, it's very scary if it gets trapped into this self thing, you know, because it's a form of control that depends entirely on yourself. Until you're not aware that your own ego is driving all these systems and these algorithms to control us, then there's nothing to do. There's no uprising like the first unions, for example. It's not about talking with your friends. It's really about only yourself. It becomes very difficult. So I'm kind of interpreting these things maybe in the worst way. But of course, this whole thing has helped us also to connect to many people, to expand our boundaries, you know, to reside in many places with many people at the same time. And that's really, really cool. And I hope that we will keep using it that way instead of for ourselves only.
Okay, time for some food. Okay, thanks everybody, and